The rise of gold and the promise of money. Money, as we know it today, is the result of a long and intricate journey, a journey that spans thousands of years. The money in your bank account, the currency you carry in your pocket, and even digital money in the form of credit are all the product of an ongoing evolution. But the reality is, the money we use today isn't what it was supposed to be. It has gone through a dramatic transformation. And to understand why your money is worth less today than it was yesterday, we must first go back in time to the origins of money itself. The origin of money. The search for stability. The idea of money is simple. It's something we use to store value, trade, and exchange. But the concept of money didn't start with bills or coins. For much of human history, people traded goods and services directly. This was known as the barter system, where a person would exchange one item for another. But bartering came with its own set of problems. It was inefficient and cumbersome. It was hard to find someone who had exactly what you needed and wanted to exchange it for what you had to offer. As human societies grew, they needed something more reliable, something that could be universally accepted, and something that wouldn't spoil, rot, or become worthless over time, and that is where gold entered the picture. Gold, unlike other materials, has always held a special place in the human psyche. It is rare, beautiful, and durable. But there's more to gold than just its beauty or scarcity. Gold has several unique physical properties that made it the perfect candidate to serve as money. Gold doesn't tarnish. It doesn't rust. It doesn't rot or decay over time. It is eternal. If you found a gold coin that was made hundreds or even thousands of years ago, it would still be as valuable as it was the day it was minted. This incorruptibility made gold the ideal medium for storing wealth. And more importantly, it was something humanity could rely on. For thousands of years, gold was the ultimate symbol of wealth. But why gold specifically? Why not silver or diamonds or something else? The answer lies in its scarcity and its incorruptible nature. The physical truth of gold. Imagine this for a moment. If you took every ounce of gold that has ever been mined in human history and put it together in one place, it would form a single cube. This cube would barely fill an Olympic swimming pool. Think about that. All the gold ever mined, from the ancient civilizations to modern-day mining operations, would take up a space that is smaller than you would think. This is how finite and rare gold truly is. Gold is not a human invention. It didn't come from the Earth's core. It arrived on Earth from the depths of space. Gold was forged in the explosions of dying stars, supernova, billions of years ago, long before Earth even existed. It came to our planet on asteroids, and when it arrived, it was as rare as it was valuable. This scarcity gave gold its unique power. It wasn't just a valuable item because a government said so. Gold was valuable because it was scarce, it was rare, and it could be stored indefinitely without losing its worth. Gold has a unique property that other materials simply can't match. It is incorruptible. It does not decay, tarnish, or rot over time. This made it the perfect way to store value across generations. When Howard Carter uncovered the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922, he found a treasure trove of gold artifacts that had been buried for over 3,000 years. The gold mask that Carter discovered was as perfect as the day it had been forged. There was no rust, no tarnish, no decay. The gold had endured through thousands of years in the dark, untouched by the ravages of time. This physical truth that gold does not corrode or decay was what made it such a valuable commodity. It wasn't just the beauty of gold that made it special. It was its ability to defy time, to preserve wealth across generations, and to be a store of value that could withstand the passage of time. The psychological leap. Gold as money throughout human history. Various civilizations independently discovered the value of gold. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs were buried with gold, which was considered the sweat of the sun, symbolizing divine power and wealth. In the ancient kingdom of Lydia, modern-day Turkey, gold was first minted into coins around 560 BC. This was a revolutionary development, as coins made it easier to trade and store wealth in a standardized form. The transition from bartering to using gold as a medium of exchange marked a significant psychological leap for humanity. It was the first time that people had agreed to use a material that wasn't directly related to everyday needs like food or livestock. Gold wasn't just useful, it had value in itself. It represented stored labor, time, and effort, things that couldn't be taken away or destroyed. This transformation was profound. No longer were people relying on the whims of nature or the decay of goods. They had found something that could store value indefinitely. It was rare, it was durable, and it was accepted by everyone as a means of exchange. This belief in gold, this trust in its ability to preserve wealth, led to the creation of the first gold-backed currencies. Coins became the standardized way to represent wealth, and these coins were backed by the physical gold that had been mined and stored by governments and central banks. Gold was money, and as long as you had gold, you could exchange it for goods and services. The problem with gold, its weight and impracticality. However, gold, despite its many virtues, had a significant problem. It was heavy, difficult to move, and dangerous to carry in large quantities. If you wanted to conduct business in a distant city, or if you had to settle accounts with someone, you had to carry large quantities of gold. This wasn't only impractical, it was risky. Gold is valuable, and anyone who knew you had it might be tempted to take it from you. This was the first major problem with gold. While it was perfect for storing wealth, it was not ideal for everyday transactions. People needed a way to carry their wealth without having to physically move gold bars or coins. They needed a more convenient way to store and exchange value. The solution came in the form of paper, specifically banknotes. The birth of paper money, a new psychological leap. The first known use of paper money dates back to China during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 AD. However, it wasn't until the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279 AD, that paper currency became widespread. These early banknotes were essentially promissory notes that could be exchanged for gold or silver. They were a form of paper-based IOU from a trusted authority, such as a government or a bank. By the 1600s, European banks began issuing paper money. People could deposit their gold at a bank and receive a promissory note in return. This note wasn't worth anything on its own, it was simply a promise that the holder could exchange it for gold at any time. The paper money wasn't valuable because it was paper. It was valuable because it was backed by something real, gold. This was the second great psychological leap. Instead of physically carrying gold around, people could now carry a piece of paper that represented their gold. The paper itself didn't have intrinsic value, but the promise behind it was what mattered. The banks and governments had the gold in their vaults, and the paper was a receipt, a promise that it could be redeemed for real money at any time. This system allowed people to carry wealth much more easily, and it paved the way for the modern financial system. No longer did you need to worry about carrying heavy bags of gold. You could carry a piece of paper that would be honored by any bank or merchant. But there was one major issue with this system: trust. The shift from The end of the gold standard and the birth of fiat money. In the final chapter of our journey, we reach the modern world, where the gold standard is a thing of the past and fiat money is the prevailing system. The shift to fiat money in 1971 marked the end of an era that had lasted for centuries. It was the final break from the physical reality of gold and the birth of an entirely new financial system, one where money is not backed by any tangible asset, but rather by the trust in the government and central banks that issue it. But what exactly does this mean for you, the everyday person? The world's money may have shifted, but the reality is that the money in your bank account today is worth less than it was yesterday, and that is no accident. Let's explore how we got here and why this system, far from being a glitch, is working exactly as it was designed to. The promise of fiat money, a new era of trust. In 1971, when President Nixon announced the suspension of the US dollar's convertibility to gold, he did more than just change the US currency. He set the world on a new financial trajectory, one that would ultimately transform how we think about and use money. Fiat money, as we know it today, has no intrinsic value. It isn't backed by gold or any other physical commodity. Instead, its value exists only because the government says it does. Fiat money is essentially paper currency or digital entries in a bank ledger that are backed by nothing but a promise. The trust in this money is what makes it valuable. This new system was marketed as a more flexible way to manage economies. Without the strict limitations of the gold standard, governments and central banks could print money freely to fund projects, stimulate economies, and respond to crises. For a while, this system worked. It allowed governments to control inflation and manage economic growth through monetary policy. Central banks could adjust interest rates, print more money, or remove it from circulation to keep the economy stable. The flexibility of fiat money was seen as a solution to the rigid constraints of the gold standard. But like any system based on trust, it also introduced the potential for abuse. The expansion of fiat money, inflation, and debt. With the abandonment of the gold standard, countries no longer had to worry about running out of gold to back their currency. The government could now issue as much money as needed to cover its expenses, no longer constrained by a fixed reserve of gold. This change promised economic growth and stability, but it also laid the groundwork for inflation, an inevitable consequence of printing money without any real backing. Inflation is the process by which the value of money decreases over time and prices of goods and services increase. While inflation is often seen as a natural part of economic growth, it is also a silent tax on your wealth. Every year, as inflation increases, the money in your bank account becomes worth less. This gradual erosion of value is the core of the fiat money system. It's built into the design. While inflation can be a tool for economic growth, it can also be a weapon for governments. By printing more money, governments can reduce the real value of their debt, making it easier to pay off obligations. This has been the go-to strategy for many countries in the post-gold standard world. But the flip side is that inflation doesn't just affect the government's debt, it affects everyone's savings. Your hard-earned money, sitting in your savings account, is quietly losing value each year as inflation eats away at it. The hidden tax. How inflation steals your wealth. We've all heard about inflation, but few realize the extent to which it impacts their lives. Inflation is often presented as a simple increase in prices. Your morning coffee might cost $5 today, but next year it could cost $5.50. The idea is that the economy is growing, and prices are rising as a result. But inflation is more than just price increases. It's an invisible force that erodes the purchasing power of your money. The real cost of inflation is not immediately visible. It doesn't show up as a bill or an expense. Instead, it quietly chips away at the value of your wealth, year after year. The money you save today will be worth less tomorrow. Over time, even small inflation rates can have a profound impact. If inflation is 2% per year, your money loses 2% of its value each year. It doesn't sound like much, but over a decade that adds up to nearly 20%. Your $100 today will be worth only $80 in 10 years if the inflation rate holds steady at 2%. This invisible tax on your wealth is one of the primary features of the fiat money system. Governments have designed the system to gradually erode the value of money over time, and they do so in a way that most people don't even notice. It's a slow, quiet process, but it's built into the very fabric of the financial system. And the worst part? It's completely legal. The consequences of fiat money, the economic instability we face. While the idea of fiat money has allowed for more flexibility in managing economies, it has also introduced a significant amount of economic instability. The value of money is no longer anchored to a physical asset like gold, so it becomes much easier for governments and central banks to manipulate the money supply. This manipulation, while it can be used to stimulate economies in the short term, also leads to economic bubbles, crashes, and recessions. The problem with fiat money is that its value is based entirely on confidence. As long as people believe in the currency, it holds value. But once confidence is shaken, the currency can quickly lose its worth. We've seen this happen in numerous instances throughout history. In the 1920s, hyperinflation ravaged the Weimar Republic in Germany. In the 1990s, Zimbabwe's economy collapsed under the weight of runaway inflation. And in the modern era, countries like Venezuela and Argentina have seen their currencies spiral into worthless notes due to excessive money printing and a lack of trust in the system. This is the dark side of fiat money, the potential for it to lose value rapidly, especially if governments abuse their power to print money. The collapse of the gold standard opened the door to this instability, and we are now living in a world where inflation is an ever-present concern. The Great Betrayal: How Fiat Money Affects Your Wealth. The biggest betrayal in the history of modern finance is the abandonment of the gold standard. Governments promised that fiat money would be a stable and reliable form of currency. But in reality, they used it as a tool to control economies, to fund wars, and to maintain power. The promise that your money would hold its value was broken, and now we are left with a system that quietly drains our wealth. This is not just a hypothetical problem, it's happening right now. The money in your bank account today is worth less than it was yesterday. You might not notice it day by day, but over time, your savings are eroded by inflation. Every dollar you have saved up is losing value year after year, and there's nothing you can do about it. The central banks and governments that control the money supply are the only ones who benefit from this system. They can print money at will, increasing the supply of currency and diluting the value of everyone's savings. And while they can manipulate the economy to their advantage, the average person is left holding the bag, watching as their wealth disappears into thin air. The search for an alternative, Bitcoin and digital currency. As the value of fiat money continues to decline, many people are looking for an alternative, a way to store their wealth outside the control of governments and central banks. This search for an alternative has given rise to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, in particular, has been marketed as digital gold, a decentralized form of money that isn't controlled by any government or central authority. Its proponents argue that Bitcoin is scarce, much like gold, and that it offers a way to preserve wealth in a system that's increasingly unstable. However, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not without their own risks. While they are scarce and decentralized, they are also highly volatile. The value of Bitcoin can swing wildly from day to day, and it is still a speculative asset rather than a reliable store of value. Bitcoin also faces regulatory challenges, with governments around the world trying to figure out how to deal with digital currencies. Unlike gold, which has stood the test of time, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are still relatively new, and their long-term viability remains uncertain. But despite these risks, Bitcoin represents a shift in the way people think about money. It's an attempt to create a financial system that is outside the control of central banks and governments. It offers a potential escape from the inflationary pressures of fiat money, but it's still a long way from being a truly stable alternative. The future of money. What comes next? The future of money is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the fiat money system is not sustainable in the long term. The value of money is eroding, and inflation is silently eating away at our savings. The promise of fiat money was that it would be stable, but it has failed to deliver on that promise. And as the system continues to unravel, people are beginning to search for alternatives, whether that's in the form of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or a return to a more stable system, like the gold standard. For now, we are stuck in a world where money loses value every day. But as people become more aware of the dangers of fiat money, the demand for an alternative will only grow. The question is, will we ever return to a system that is based on something real, like gold? Or will we continue down this path of digital money, hoping that the promise of trust will be enough to hold the system together?